What if I told you that your next car, your groceries, and even your paycheck are about to get more expensive? Donald Trump just launched an economic war against Europe, and it is already backfiring. His administration imposed a 25% tariff on European car imports, promising to bring back American jobs. But instead of strengthening the economy, it triggered a devastating retaliation from the European Union. Now, the US is facing 26 billion euros in counter-tariffs, hitting key American industries where it hurts the most: automakers, farmers, and manufacturers. So, is this just another political stunt? Or has Trump pushed the country into an economic disaster? What's happening? Donald Trump has reignited a transatlantic trade war, imposing a staggering 25% tariff on European car imports. His administration argues that this move is essential to restoring American manufacturing and protecting domestic jobs. Trump has long claimed that unfair trade practices by the European Union have harmed U.S. industries, and his solution is to force European automakers to either build their vehicles in the United States or face steep import duties. The policy is framed as a win for American workers, but within hours of the announcement, economic experts and industry leaders sound the alarm. The European Union wastes no time in responding. Just days later, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen announced a massive retaliation package. The European Union slaps 26 billion euros in tariffs on a wide range of American goods, escalating the trade conflict into a full-blown economic battle. These new tariffs do not just target U.S. automakers. Instead, they are designed to strike at multiple sectors of the American economy, from agriculture to technology. Back in Washington, Trump's advisors attempt to downplay the risk, insisting that Europe will ultimately fold under U.S. pressure. But financial analysts, automakers, and trade experts strongly disagree. They warn that tariffs of this magnitude will not just hurt European businesses. They will drive up costs for American consumers and manufacturers. Instead of reviving domestic production, they argue, these trade restrictions could push the United States toward economic instability. The backlash intensifies as major business coalitions and lawmakers call for de-escalation. The American Chamber of Commerce warns that prolonged trade tensions could cost the economy billions. Even key Republican leaders begin questioning the strategy, concerned that the tariffs will do more harm than good. Yet, despite mounting criticism, the Trump administration remains firm. The White House insists that the tariffs will bring back jobs and strengthen American industry. But as the trade war deepens, it becomes clear that the opposite is happening. And nowhere is the damage more apparent than in the auto industry, which now finds itself at the center of a rapidly unfolding crisis. The auto industry faces a crisis, both in America and Europe. For years, American automakers have relied on a global supply chain to produce vehicles at competitive prices. European companies provide essential components, from high-performance transmissions to cutting-edge electronic systems. Trump's tariffs, however, threaten to dismantle this interconnected system overnight. The cost of importing these critical parts from Germany, Italy, and France soars, forcing American automakers to either absorb the financial hit or pass the increased costs onto consumers. Major players like Ford, General Motors, and Tesla are among the first to feel the impact. Ford and General Motors both rely on European-engineered transmissions and braking systems, while Tesla imports specialized battery components from Germany. With tariffs driving up prices, manufacturing costs climb sharply, putting pressure on these companies to either cut jobs or increase the price of their vehicles. As American manufacturers scramble to adjust, the European Union retaliates with tariffs of its own. A 25% duty is placed on US-made cars being exported to Europe, making them significantly more expensive for European consumers. This spells trouble for American brands like Jeep, Ford, and Cadillac, which have been working for years to gain market share in Europe. Now, with their vehicles becoming more costly, European buyers begin looking elsewhere, primarily to German, Japanese, and South Korean competitors. Automakers on both sides of the Atlantic brace for financial strain. In the United States, car manufacturers face shrinking profit margins, potential layoffs, and reduced production. In Europe, companies like BMW and Volkswagen, which have assembly plants in America, begin reconsidering their investments. If the trade war drags on, they may choose to scale back production in the United States and shift operations to other countries with more stable trade policies. For American consumers, the effects are immediate. Car prices begin rising, making everything from budget-friendly sedans to high-end luxury vehicles more expensive. Dealerships warn that if the tariffs remain in place, the average cost of a new car in the United States could increase by thousands of dollars. But the auto industry is just the first domino to fall, because Europe's counterattack is far more strategic than a simple tit-for-tat trade retaliation. Europe's counterattack. The European Union does not just respond to Trump's tariffs, it carefully crafts its retaliation to inflict maximum political damage. Instead of applying broad economy-wide duties, European leaders take aim at Trump's strongest political base, Republican-led states. The European Union's tariffs specifically target American agricultural exports, knowing that rural states heavily reliant on farming played a crucial role in Trump's electoral victories. Soybeans, beef, and poultry, products that are exported in massive quantities to Europe, are now subject to steep tariffs. Farmers in Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas, and other Midwestern states, already struggling with supply chain disruptions and inflation, find themselves facing another economic hit. The move is not just about trade, it is a direct challenge to Trump's political support. The European strategy is a familiar one. Back in Trump's first term, when he imposed tariffs on European steel and aluminum, the European Union responded by targeting American exports with political significance. Bourbon from Kentucky, motorcycles from Wisconsin, and Levi's jeans from California were all hit with retaliatory tariffs, sending a clear message that Europe would not tolerate economic aggression. Now history is repeating itself, but this time the stakes are even higher. Farmers already on edge from past trade conflicts begin to voice their concerns. Many supported Trump's America First policies, but as European buyers pull back from purchasing U.S. agricultural products, their businesses suffer. For some, this is not just about short-term losses, it is about long-term survival. As pressure builds, the White House tries to reassure affected industries, promising that alternative trade deals with other countries will make up for lost European business. But experts warn that replacing the European Union as a trading partner will not be easy. The European Union is one of the largest markets for American agricultural goods, and finding new buyers will take time that many farmers do not have. And while the auto and agriculture industries bear the brunt of the crisis, they are far from the only sectors being dragged into the trade war. The domino effect. One of the biggest areas of concern is the U.S. energy sector. The United States has become a major supplier of liquefied natural gas to Europe. But with tensions rising, European leaders start looking for alternative sources. Countries like Qatar and Australia emerge as potential suppliers, threatening to cut U.S. energy producers out of the European market. If this shift becomes permanent, American oil and gas companies could lose billions in revenue. At the same time, the technology industry faces its own set of challenges. European lawmakers, already wary of American dominance in the tech sector, consider implementing stricter regulations on U.S. companies like Apple, Google, and Intel. There is growing talk of imposing new digital taxes or restrictions, making it harder for these firms to operate freely in European markets. For American businesses, the long-term consequences of this trade war are becoming clear. The European Union is not just retaliating, it is rewriting the rules of global trade. By strengthening economic ties with China and other major markets, Europe is reducing its reliance on U.S. imports, creating a new trade order that may not include America as its central player. With industries collapsing, businesses panicking, and global alliances shifting, the real question is, how long can the United States sustain this trade war before the damage becomes irreversible? The real victims. When Donald Trump imposed tariffs on European imports, He framed it as a move to protect American industries and bring jobs back to the United States. However, within weeks of the new tariffs going into effect, it became clear that the biggest victims of this economic conflict were not European automakers or foreign manufacturers. It was American consumers and businesses. Higher tariffs meant that businesses relying on European materials now faced significantly increased costs. Automakers, retailers, and even small businesses that depended on imported components saw their expenses skyrocket. Companies had two choices: absorb the financial burden or pass the costs on to consumers. Most chose the latter. Inflation surged as the price of goods increased across multiple industries. The auto sector was the first to experience the shock. With essential European components like transmissions, electronics, and precision-engineered parts becoming more expensive, American automakers raised the price of their vehicles. Car dealerships warned that even budget-friendly models could see price hikes of several $1,000s. Consumers who were already struggling with rising living costs now found themselves paying more for essential transportation. The impact extended far beyond automobiles. Retail prices for everyday goods also climbed as businesses grappled with supply chain disruptions. Grocery stores saw increases in the cost of imported food products, particularly specialty goods from Europe. Essential household items, electronics, and even medicine became more expensive as manufacturers struggled with higher import costs. As economic pressure mounted, it became clear that American businesses and consumers were bearing the brunt of the trade war, not European manufacturers. But the damage did not stop with rising consumer prices. As industries suffered, corporate leaders realized they could not afford to wait for Washington to reverse course. They had to take action themselves. Corporate America fights back. The initial response to Trump's tariffs had been cautious, with many companies hoping the trade war would be a temporary measure. But as the economic damage became more apparent, corporate America began pushing back. Major companies like Tesla, Ford, and John Deere publicly voiced their opposition to the tariffs, warning that the new trade policies were not helping American businesses. They were hurting them. Tesla, which depended on European battery components and specialized materials, saw its production costs spike. Ford and General Motors faced similar challenges, with supply chain disruptions delaying production and driving up expenses. John Deere, one of America's most iconic agricultural machinery manufacturers, warned that the tariffs were not just harming automakers. They were devastating the farming industry as well. With European tariffs making U.S. agricultural exports less competitive, many farmers had less income to invest in new equipment. As a result, companies like John Deere saw a sharp decline in orders, leading to concerns about potential layoffs. In response, many corporations began looking for ways to bypass the tariffs altogether. Some considered moving production to Mexico or Canada, where trade agreements with Europe remained intact. By shifting operations just outside U.S. borders, companies could continue manufacturing without being subjected to Trump's tariffs. While this strategy made economic sense, it also contradicted Trump's stated goal of bringing manufacturing jobs back to the United States. Instead of creating new jobs, the tariffs were driving businesses away. The U.S. stock market reflected growing concerns about the trade war. Analysts warned that if tariffs remained in place, they could trigger a recession. Investors grew wary, and stock prices for major manufacturing, energy, and agricultural companies became increasingly volatile. Economic uncertainty loomed large, and business leaders urged the Trump administration to reconsider its approach before the damage became irreversible. But as America struggled to contain the fallout, another global power saw an opportunity and wasted no time in capitalizing on it. China steps in. While the United States and Europe clashed over tariffs, China quietly positioned itself as the biggest beneficiary of the trade war. European businesses, frustrated with the instability of U.S. trade policies, began turning to China for alternative trade deals. Chinese manufacturers, eager to expand their influence, offered European companies competitive prices, stable supply chains, and fewer regulatory hurdles. This shift allowed China to strengthen its economic ties with Europe, while weakening America's position in global trade. At the same time, China expanded its agricultural partnerships with European nations, stepping in to replace U.S. suppliers. With American soybean and meat exports becoming less competitive due to European tariffs, China negotiated deals to provide Europe with similar products at lower prices. The technology sector also felt the impact. European companies that once relied on U.S. tech firms began forming partnerships with Chinese companies instead. Beijing's aggressive investment in artificial intelligence, telecommunications, and renewable energy positioned China as a leading alternative to American technology. As China deepened its economic influence, the balance of global trade began shifting. Once the undisputed leader in international commerce, the United States found itself increasingly isolated. European nations, once key allies in the U.S.-led economic order, were now looking toward China as a more reliable and stable trade partner. For Washington, this was a wake-up call. The trade war had not strengthened America's position, it had weakened it. By pushing Europe away, the U.S. had created an opening for China to expand its influence, a move that could have long-term geopolitical consequences. As tensions continued to rise, the effects of the trade war are also sending shockwaves through Wall Street, where financial markets are reacting with growing alarm. Wall Street reacts to the crisis. As job losses mount and industries struggle, investors on Wall Street are growing increasingly uneasy. The stock market, which once thrived on promises of economic growth, is now in turmoil. Uncertainty surrounding the trade war has led to extreme volatility, with stock prices for major automakers, energy companies, and agricultural firms fluctuating wildly. Investors are pulling back, unwilling to take risks in an environment where economic policies shift unpredictably. American businesses, already burdened by higher production costs, are delaying expansion plans and investment decisions, further stalling economic growth. The financial uncertainty is not just affecting corporations, it is also hitting retirement accounts, pension funds, and everyday investors who rely on the stability of the market. The automotive sector, which plays a crucial role in the U.S. economy, is one of the worst-hit industries. Stocks for companies like Ford and General Motors have plummeted, reflecting investor fears that tariffs will make American-made cars less competitive in both domestic and international markets. Tesla, once seen as a leader in electric vehicle production, is also struggling, as increased costs for imported European components eat into its profits. Agricultural stocks are also taking a hit. Major agribusiness companies like Cargill and Archer Daniels Midland, which depend heavily on exports, are seeing declining revenues as European customers shift to alternative suppliers. Farmers, already operating on thin margins, are struggling to secure loans and financial support, leading to concerns about widespread bankruptcies in rural America. The energy sector, which once benefited from strong exports of liquefied natural gas to Europe, is also facing uncertainty. With European energy companies now seeking alternative suppliers, American natural gas producers are watching their stock values decline. Investors are worried that long-term energy contracts with European nations may be at risk, further destabilizing the industry. The Federal Reserve is closely monitoring the situation, as the ongoing trade war raises fears of an economic slowdown. Financial analysts warn that if the uncertainty continues, it could push the United States closer to a recession. Businesses that rely on stable market conditions are now bracing for more turbulence, as trade conflicts show no signs of resolution. While the United States faces economic instability, another battle is emerging, one that threatens America's leadership in technology, energy, and manufacturing. Technology, energy, and manufacturing. The U.S. faces a permanent shift. One of the biggest consequences of the trade war is the growing divide in technology and energy innovation. The European Union, once a major market for American tech giants, is now considering stricter regulations that could limit the influence of companies like Apple, Google, and Intel. European lawmakers are pushing for stronger data protection laws, digital taxation, and antitrust measures aimed at reducing America's dominance in the tech industry. As these regulations take effect, American companies may find it harder to do business in Europe, forcing them to focus on domestic markets, while European and Chinese tech firms expand their global reach. This shift could weaken the long-term influence of Silicon Valley, which has traditionally been a driving force in global innovation. Meanwhile, the energy sector is undergoing a major transformation. European nations are increasingly investing in renewable energy, seeking to move away from reliance on American fossil fuels. The European Union has announced ambitious plans to expand wind, solar, and nuclear energy, reducing its dependence on U.S. liquefied natural gas and oil exports. China, too, is pushing forward in renewable energy and artificial intelligence, solidifying its role as a leader in next-generation technologies. While the United States remains bogged down in trade disputes, its global competitors are advancing rapidly, seizing opportunities that could define the future of economic power. With Europe and China accelerating their efforts in green energy and artificial intelligence, the United States risks falling behind. If Washington does not adjust its policies soon, it could lose its competitive edge in some of the most crucial industries of the 21st century. As America struggles with economic instability, global trade shifts, and innovation setbacks, the biggest question remains: can the United States recover, or is this the beginning of permanent economic decline? Can Trump reverse the damage, or is it too late? Donald Trump's second-term trade policies will determine whether the United States can recover from the economic turmoil sparked by his tariffs, or if the country is on an irreversible path toward decline. The stakes could not be higher. The trade war with the European Union has fractured long-standing economic relationships, driven up costs for American businesses, and put entire industries at risk. Now the administration faces a critical decision: double down on protectionism or shift toward a new strategy that rebuilds global trust. Within Washington, the debate is fierce. Supporters of Trump's approach argue that tariffs are necessary to force other nations to negotiate fairer trade deals. They claim that short-term economic pain is a small price to pay for long-term industrial revival. Trump himself insists that tariffs will eventually pressure automakers and manufacturers to bring jobs back to American soil, making the nation more self-sufficient. But economists and business leaders are warning of a different reality. The longer the tariffs remain in place, the deeper the economic wounds become. American automakers are struggling with rising costs, and European markets are no longer as welcoming to U.S. exports. Farmers, already battered by past trade wars, are seeing demand for their products shrink as Europe shifts to other suppliers. Tech companies face increased restrictions in European markets. Meanwhile, energy firms are bracing for the possibility that the European Union will find permanent alternatives to American natural gas. The pressure is mounting for Trump to reconsider his approach. Some lawmakers within his own party are urging a pivot, arguing that America cannot afford to isolate itself from global trade. Business coalitions are calling for a rollback of tariffs, warning that continued economic friction could lead to a prolonged downturn. Even key Republican governors, representing states hardest hit by retaliatory tariffs, are demanding a reassessment of the policy. Yet reversing course is not so simple. Trump's administration has built its economic strategy on the idea of America first, and any major shift could be seen as an admission of failure. If the administration does not find a way to de-escalate tensions while saving face, the country may remain trapped in a cycle of economic retaliation. The longer this continues, the harder it will be for the United States to reclaim its standing as the world's dominant economic force. And that is the biggest threat of all, because while America hesitates, the rest of the world is moving forward, reshaping the global economic order without U.S. leadership. And keeping up will require more than just rolling back tariffs. It will demand a complete transformation of America's trade strategy. The future of U.S. trade. What needs to change? If the United States wants to maintain its economic leadership, it must make dramatic changes to its trade policies. The days of relying on old industrial models are over. To stay competitive in the 21st century, America needs to focus on innovation, modernize its manufacturing sector, and build stronger global partnerships. Rebuilding domestic manufacturing is essential, but tariffs alone will not bring jobs back. Instead, the government must invest in advanced industries like artificial intelligence, clean energy, biotechnology, and semiconductor production. Other nations are already moving in this direction. China has committed billions to becoming a global leader in renewable energy and chip manufacturing, while Europe is prioritizing green technology and digital transformation. If the United States does not make similar investments, it will fall behind. Securing international partnerships is another crucial step. Instead of engaging in trade wars, the United States must work to strengthen economic ties with key allies. That means negotiating fair trade agreements with Europe rather than imposing tariffs. It means expanding cooperation with emerging markets like India and Southeast Asia. And it means creating new economic incentives that encourage businesses to invest in American industries without resorting to protectionism. Perhaps most importantly, the United States must decide whether it wants to be an isolated economic power or a leader in global trade. Right now, policies of economic nationalism are driving other nations to seek alternatives, leaving America on the sidelines. If this trend continues, the country could find itself locked out of key markets, struggling to compete in a world where trade flows around, rather than through, the United States. But will Trump's policies help America adapt to this new reality, or are they accelerating the country's decline? The final verdict. As the trade war continues, the signs are becoming harder to ignore. The United States is no longer the only major player in the global economy. And if it does not adjust, it could permanently lose its place as the world's leading economic power. The longer tariffs remain in place, the more businesses will shift their operations elsewhere, and the harder it will be to undo the damage. The global economy is evolving, and the nations that innovate, whether in technology, energy, or trade strategy, will be the ones that define the future. Europe is rapidly diversifying its economic alliances. China is cementing itself as the backbone of global supply chains. India is emerging as a technological powerhouse. While these nations push forward, the United States is at risk of falling behind, weighed down by policies that prioritize short-term political gains over long-term economic strategy. The global economy is shifting fast, and the United States is at a crossroads. Will Trump's trade war push America further into isolation? Or can the country reclaim its economic dominance before it is too late? The stakes have never been higher, and the decisions made now will shape the future for decades to come. But what do you think? Is this the beginning of the end for U.S. economic power, or can America still turn things around? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.